I'm June Gruber, an associate professor of psychology at the University of Colorado Boulder and director of this mental health expert series. I'm excited to be here today with Dr. Darby Saxbe, an associate professor of psychology at the University of Southern California. So thanks for being here today, Darby.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was wondering if you could start by saying just a bit about the kind of mental health work and research that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I study stress and families and sort of how family environments get under the skin to affect our health. So some of my early studies in graduate school looked at how couples divided household labor and how that was linked to their everyday patterns of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And from doing that work, I got really interested in how physiology and physical health kind of intersect with family roles and routines. And I currently kind of the work I'm doing now zeroes in on what I think is a really rich time for hormones, biological processes, and also for family dynamics, which is the transition to parenthood. So I am recruiting cohabiting couples that are about to have their first child, and I follow them from pregnancy across the first year postpartum. So I'm looking at how new parents prepare to become parents, how they talk to each other about that transition, how they navigate the relationship challenges, to what extent their stress hormones and other hormones are reflecting those changes. And then I have a small sub-study where I'm looking at fathers' brains and how their brains are changing from prenatal to postpartum. So I'm currently in the process of writing a proposal to try to bring our kids back into the lab. Our oldest babies that have been born to that study are about to turn 7, which is a good illustration of just like how long it's taken me to collect the data. We've just been really slow, but we've had a lot of moving parts in this study. And so now we're really eager to kind of see how did these adaptations to parenthood affect the well-being of the kids and the kids' brain development over time. So that's what I'm up to.
That's amazing. How did you go about getting started in this work?
Yeah, so should I go all the way back to like pre-grad school or more just kind of what I'm doing in this very moment?
How about at the very beginning?
Okay, so I was an English major in college. I've always loved to read, and I actually wanted to be an English professor. And then I discovered that that's a field in which there are absolutely no jobs. And, sort of naively thought that psychology might lead to an easier academic job market. Here's my third grader.
Hello.
Hi. And I actually took a class in college as part of my English major that was about reading Freud case studies as if they were literature. And sort of started to think not only are these interesting literature, but also what he does kind of seems fun. Like he's solving puzzles about cases and helping people address their symptoms. Of course, I didn't realize that Freud is not really the model for how most clinical psychologists operate these days. But that kind of first planted the seeds of clinical psychology. And then after college, I worked, I was just looking for research experiences so that I could apply to grad school. And I worked with a woman at the New School in New York City who was looking at women's experience navigating parenting and sort of figuring out like how they approached like childcare division of labor and families. And through that work kind of connected with my graduate advisor at UCLA's Center for the Everyday Lives of Families. And then from there, kind of got into the program of research I'm doing now. So I sort of was always interested in gender relationships and family dynamics and parenting and navigating household labor. And that's just kind of like turned into a program of research through a few different lucky breaks. And as you can see, I don't just study families and stress, right? I'm also living it on a daily basis with both kids at home during the pandemic.
It's amazing how much you've done. And as you're saying, like over the years and balancing being a parent and being an academic. And I loved seeing your son there. That was amazing. As you're thinking about all of this and all the kind of work you've done along the way, the roles that have been juggled, right? What have been some like frustrations or challenges along the way, and also successes too that you savored?
Yeah, I think it's it's like my career path makes sense and feels feasible from the rear view mirror. Is it the mirror or the window? Whichever way, like, in hindsight,
Yeah.
it all feels like it made sense, but as I was living it, none of it made sense. And I feel like I just sort of like things happened to work out in ways that helped me get set up for what I'm doing now. Um, Trying to figure out when and whether and how to have kids was really challenging, just sort of how to time that. So I had my first child as an intern, doing a pre-doctoral clinical psychology internship. And that was both a hard time, but also in some ways a good time to have a first baby, because then I had a postdoc where I had some flexibility. I had my second kid a few years later, and getting ready to be on the academic job market and compete for academic jobs while having two really little kids was just really overwhelming. And I had a lot of feelings like this just isn't going to work. I'm not going to find a position. I'm so far behind my peers, who are maybe able to delay child rearing a little bit longer. Like I just felt really, really behind, like in the early stages of both getting a job and then kind of the first half of being a tenure track academic. So I still feel like, I think everyone has a bit of imposter syndrome who's in this kind of career, because it's such a like skinny pyramid, right? There are a lot of people that are interested in research in grad school, and then a smaller number who kind of end up in grad school doing research, and then a smaller number who sort of go to postdoctoral and then faculty positions. And I want to be encouraging, because I think it's absolutely feasible for people to get amazing jobs, and there are academic jobs, and I don't want to dissuade people from going that route, but it really does feel like, as you climb the ladder, you sort of have fewer peers at every level, and there are many, many leaky pipeline ways that you can sort of drop out. And I definitely felt like there were quite a few junctures during my training where I easily could have, if I hadn't had the right kind of support or just the right kind of good fortune. So that's kind of what I mean by it all makes sense in retrospect, but at the time it all felt like, I don't know if I'm going to get this job or this grant or this paper published or get into the grad school I want to get into. And so, things have just sort of shaped out in a way that I'm really grateful for.
And I mean, what your latter point too, just, about the leaky pipeline along the way, I think at the paper, you and I and a large group of, over
Yeah.
50 women psychologists wrote, these are the real issues that are part of the career path, right? And challenges too that are still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the timing of, when many people want to start families, just, and we wrote about this in our paper, just really is on a collision course with, this very front-loaded sort of career structure where productivity is evaluated sort of very early on when you start a position. And so that just feels like a little bit of a mismatch when it comes to kind of planning your life trajectory. So, I think I look forward to an extremely productive, like third decade of my career, but the first decade was often really challenging for those reasons.
I mean, and as you kind of look ahead in your own career in the field, what do you see as the most important next steps for the science and maybe even for the, I don't know, the kind of practice of including women in our field more so as we look ahead?
Yeah. I mean, I think, that's such a broad question and such an important one. And there are so many kind of different answers. I think we have to recognize that so much of graduate training and kind of early, entry into academia is sort of designed for a model of like the unencumbered, independently wealthy white male academic who's not coming into grad school with caregiving responsibilities, who's not entering onto the job market with those responsibilities, who's mobile, whose life choices aren't constrained by certain obligations. And I think we just need to kind of build tolerance for different paths and sort of different timings. There's sort of a sense that if you've been kind of out of the field for a certain number of years, it's hard to come back, right? We don't have enough sort of entryway paths. But I mean, I think the bottom line is that we need sort of better research funding in this country, and we need, greater investment from universities in creating sort of viable faculty career setups, right? Like I think there's so many issues that we can bring to bear, like the adjunctification of higher education and the paucity of grant funding, and all of those work together to just make this real winner takes all sort of hyper competitive pathway into careers. And I think that counts against women, when it's all about, like numbers, and doesn't take into consideration different paths.
Absolutely. And I guess, if you had advice for people watching this interview, the public students, other, aspiring women scientists who might be interested in the field or getting engaged, what might that be?
Yeah, I would say we need you. Like, don't give up. Research desperately needs more diverse voices and perspectives and lived experiences, right? It's because of the way that academia is often geared around the kind of, like I said, independently wealthy white male model, that I think our research perspectives end up being really limited. I think it's why so much of our research focuses on weird populations, and why we don't have enough research on gender or on things that really matter in women's lives. So, like, we want you in the field, and find supportive mentors that can, understand your challenges and help respect work-life balance. You're not just a computer that's going to crank out output. I think having mentors that appreciate that and value your lived experience is part of just increasing the sort of diversity of career pathways for everybody, not just for women. And building like a more humane academia, just like we sort of need to build a more humane society in a lot of ways. So some of those are policies outside of academia, like whether we have universal family leave or healthcare, right? Like anything we can do to kind of have a better safety net, I think, for families is going to support women and ultimately support women academics as well. So, anyone who can sort of advocate for that is also going to help improve science.
Thank you so much, Darby, for speaking today. This was inspiring, and I think a really important and just under-discussed or neglected aspect of the field, which is the role of women in it and the importance of representing them.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you and I can help to represent the women, and I really am optimistic for the next generation of trainees who can continue this work and do even better. On that note.
On that note, thanks. Have a good day, Darby.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.